Have you ever heard the phrase, too many cooks can ruin the stew? Well, that may be the case here with Scream 7. According to third-party source Cinestealth, Scream 7 is going to have 4 in total writers. We learned that from this hilarious gif of a young Snoop Dogg. Full name Snoopicus Doggicus. In today's video, I want to talk a little bit about who I think those 4 writers are, on top of talking about if this could potentially ruin the stew like I just said. I also want to talk a little bit about the gigantic mosquito bite on my forehead right now that is driving me crazy. So without further ado, let's talk about all them things.
Well, sometimes that is better.
Before we get into this video though, a real quick word from our sponsor. Don't Get Stabbed is a party game where you kill your family and friends. For pretend. This spooky card game is playable for 3 to 5 players, where one person acts as the killer, whoever is the most evil, and everyone else who isn't lemon-scented plays as victims. All players take turns drawing cards. If a victim gets 3 stab cards, they die, but they can use action cards to avoid getting stabbed. Victims can also use combo cards for a riskier chance at escaping. The killer, on the other hand, has some special powers. If the killer draws a stab card, they can put it back in the deck wherever they want. They can also use action and combo cards to thwart victims' attempts at staying alive. And no, you don't get to actually kill them. Slash into this killer card game by purchasing it on Amazon or don'tgetstabbed.com. Use promo code KillJoyJake at checkout for 10% off your order. Check out Don't Get Stabbed now so you don't get stabbed! Alright, so getting into this. Rumor has it that apparently Scream 7 will have 4 writers. This comes from third-party source Cinestealth, and mind you, take this with a grain of salt. This is just a rumor, this is not 100% confirmed. But let's talk about it like it is confirmed. Will 4 writers ruin Scream 7, or could this be a secret good thing? Well, let's run through all the facts that we do know about the film so far. James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick, who wrote the previous 2 installments in the film, will most likely return for Scream 7 and probably already have some kind of draft. We've learned this from other third-party sources like Viewer Anon. I would be shocked if they didn't bring them back considering the success of the last 2 movies, despite what so many internet commenters have to say about their writing. In my opinion, the 2 scripts that James and Guy wrote are not the tightest scripts I've ever read, but they absolutely capture the fun energy of the previous Scream films that came before them. Some of the big positives, in my opinion, are just the overall kills in the last 2 movies have been some of the most brutal of the entire franchise, on top of a great new lead character in Sam Carpenter, who is so well written, and I cannot wait to see how her arc resolves in Scream 7. Some things I'm not crazy about, but it's also not like the biggest complaints, is there's some little plot holes here and there. I also feel like Scream 5 has a pretty weak start. It's probably my least favorite act of like the entire Guy Busick, James Vanderbilt era. Tara dies in the opening to Scream 2022, title card, and then she's magically okay in the hospital, even though the last thing we saw was Ghostface going down with a knife and basically killing her. I don't know if that's a script issue or more so just like they decided to film that for a cool title card reveal, and they probably shouldn't have, but there's some moments in Scream 5's opening that I'm just not crazy about. We should have had an opening kill, and we could have introduced some of these side characters a little better than we did. The Scream 6 reveal is also a little obvious in my opinion, but I feel like there's parts of that were intentional. So personally, I don't hate Scream 6's third act. I think it's a lot of fun. So do they have the tightest writing I've ever seen? No, but does Scream really need that? Like, does it really need that? You're telling me that scene in Scream 2 where Derek gets up on the table and starts singing to Sydney is a tight moment? I don't know about that. How about the sequence in Scream 3 where the house blows up and nobody smelled the gas up until that point? Oh, and there's no flashlights in the house. We decided to use a lighter. Is that really a tight script? Is that really a tight script? I don't know. In my opinion, all the Scream movies have at least one moment where I'm like, what the f were they thinking? But it's a fun charm about the franchise that personally I've grown to love. So those 2 are basically confirmed to be returning for Scream 7. Of course they're going to be writing it. I mean, Guy Busick has a hand in Final Destination 6 because these movies are so successful, and guess what? That shares pretty much the same audience. Guy Busick right now is killing it, by the way. Love you, Guy. But that leaves us still with 2 other writers. Who could that be? You know, theoretically. Well, recently, on a channel called Craven Something Scary, ran by my good friend Steven, CSS, as I'm going to call him for short, interviewed director Christopher Landon. Now, during this interview, Chris said some very interesting things about how he always has a hand in the scripts that he makes into films. So with Scream 7, Chris Landon will most likely have some sort of co-writer credit. But in my opinion, what I think is like the case going on here behind the scenes, if you want to get even more technical, is that James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick Busick have already written a script that Chris Landon just made little edits and changes to. I don't know if he was necessarily there or in the room when they were actually coming up with the story. Chris just decided to be like, oh, what if we did this here instead? Or what if this character said this thing instead of this thing? I don't think it would be such a big change to the point where the entire plot is a completely different movie than what Guy and James had originally intended, but maybe things to make the tone a little more fun and, well, Christopher Landon-y. He's got some pretty fun and campy movies that really work for me, like Happy Death Day and Freaky. Speaking of the latter there, I think Michael Kennedy may actually be a pretty good option for your potential number 4 writer. As some of you may or may not know, Michael Kennedy is the screenwriter behind Freaky, another Christopher Landon movie that absolutely kicks ass with Vince Vaughn and Kathryn Newton, who give electric performances. It would be really cool to see his input on a Scream movie, especially considering that he's a huge fan, as he said many times on Twitter, or if you want to call it X. It's Twitter, goddammit. Now, since we're speculating at this point, talking about people who may or may not even be relatively involved with the project, can we just talk about a pipe dream I have with Scream 7 real quick? Could you imagine if Kevin Williamson is the 4th writer on this project? Kevin Williamson is, of course, the legendary writer behind the original Scream film and also 2 of its sequels. 2 of, well, the better ones, in my opinion. Debbie salt's kind of growing on me, I gotta admit it. Oh, I hate saying that. I hate it. I hate saying that. Ugh. But it would be really cool to see him return for what's probably going to be promoted as the final chapter in the Scream franchise, even though it's definitely not, and Scream 8 is going to happen, whether you like it or not. I really love a lot of Kevin Williamson movies. I think Scream and Scream 4 are bangers with killer murder mysteries and awesome reveals. But then he also offered up the story for a movie called Sick from earlier this year that I just absolutely was not a big fan of. I can't really go into why that movie is just so unbelievably inaccurate to something that literally just happened, but it's beyond frustrating. I just can't get into the movie, not crazy about it. But one thing that is absolutely so phenomenal about that movie is the Kevin Williamson chase scenes that I know my man wrote. My God, the chase scenes in that movie are a 10 out of 10. Better than some of the Scream sequels, in my opinion. Hot take. There's this one sequence in the movie where your main final girl is getting away on this raft and the killer is trying to stab her through the raft like it's that sequence in Creepshow 2. Holy shit! I was so bored with the movie up until that point, and then I'm on the edge of my seat about a character I don't even care about. I'm like, oh my God, Kevin, you're a God. It's been said that Williamson had some kind of creative involvement with the last 2 films. I hope that he has maybe even more with Scream 7. Now, it's been fun talking about all the good news here with all these super experienced writers potentially joining the creative process of writing a new Scream film. But there is a dark side to this that unfortunately we gotta get into. Going back to the very first thing I said in this video, too many cooks can ruin the stew mocker. That's not what I said, but I just really wanted to get that stew joke in there. He's dead, get over it. But here's the thing, even with a bunch of writers who have so much experience like Kevin Williamson, this could result in not the best product. Once again, going back to that Sick movie that came out earlier in 2023, it didn't have the best characters and, well, overall story or murder mystery in my opinion. Now, while Kevin Williamson is credited as a writer on this film, we also have another writer in here that personally I've never heard of working on anything before this. In no way am I saying this other person is a bad writer, they're just inexperienced, and that's okay. The only way to gain more experience is to keep writing movies, so I wish her nothing but the best. But what do you think Sick from 2023 would have looked like if just Kevin Williamson had wrote it? Would it maybe have been better? Not trying to step on any toes with that movie, I'm just trying to make a point. I think when you have multiple writers who all want something different from a project, it rarely results in a good product. I look at something like Halloween Ends and I think that movie could have been great. It has the concept for it, same with Sick, but the problem is they have too many things going on that kind of pull at each other. Halloween Ends, for instance, features a script where Laurie Strode does things that she would never say or do. She's actively celebrating Halloween only a couple years after her daughter died on that night, and also trauma she experienced from 1978 that made her go into hiding for 40 years, her entire life pretty much. And now she's celebrating, having a great time, carving a pumpkin and telling Allison to pull her tits out for some guy she literally just met. That's maybe how Jamie Lee Curtis would handle the situation in real life, but not how Laurie Strode would, not in this timeline. I'm so worried about Scream 7 because I feel like this is going to happen to the character of Sam Carpenter, who up until this point has been written so well, and I really want a good and fitting ending for her in Scream 7. The conclusion means a lot to a character's arc. And if they start giving Sam, who is the main character at this point, a bunch of lines of things that she would just simply never say or do, that's gonna be unbelievably frustrating. The biggest thing I'm worried about with Scream 7 is that maybe our characters are going to be in a place where they're just absolutely fine and totally mentally healthy and stable and everything's great, even though they just went through so much trauma in the last like 2 years of their lives or whenever this movie takes place, I'm just not going to be able to buy that. Giving an example from Scream 6 too, Mindy Meeks starts off the film, her reintroduction, by saying that she has no trauma, just nothing, doesn't bother her at all that she went through this super traumatic thing in the previous film. Now mind you, that would have been an awesome way to reintroduce her character if she had maybe some hidden trauma she didn't want to talk about and then totally broke down in front of her significant other, but that never happens in the film. She's just this superwoman who feels no emotions, and I just can't believe that. That's not realistic. If my brother almost got stabbed to death by someone else in our friend group, I would be traumatized maybe for my entire life about that and be so overprotective of him, but Mindy just doesn't show that kind of attitude in the film at any point. That's just so unrealistic to me and very uncharacteristic of the Scream franchise that usually nails that. If Scream 7 is going to be successful, I think our core 4 characters should be in the absolute worst spots of their lives when we get to the beginning of Scream 7. Now, the ending of the film can be triumphant and joyous and a big celebration of, oh my god, we stopped Ghostfaces forever. Yeah, but if we start the film like that, I just feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot from the get-go. One more movie comparison, and I promise I'm going to stop talking. But look at Spider-Man 2. Oftentimes regarded as the best Spider-Man film ever made, this immediately starts off Peter Parker in the worst position of his life. To heavily oversimplify the plot of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, basically the entire time Peter Parker is just getting the shit kicked out of him. I mean, they are torturing this mother the entire movie, but by the time you get to the end of the film, he defeats Doc Ock, and it's awesome. The first time I saw that, little kid Jake was just losing his mind. At the time, I didn't know why, but as an adult, I realized it's because the entire movie, they're just kicking and punching the shit out of this main character, and then he finally gets a big win at the end of the film. If they really want to up the stakes, they really want to give us some good character moments here, they got to do that for some of our core 4 members here and give us a better story than we've gotten even in the last 2 films. Honestly, that and the killer reveal are the 2 biggest things I'm worried about character-wise with Scream 7, considering that there's so many writers. Some people want to take it in one direction, maybe some of the other writers want to take it in another, and that's going to ultimately result in a film that doesn't feel complete and kind of feels all over the place. If they commit to one thing and they all get on the same page about it, it could be something really good, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be what I just said. But if they start in a dark place, they're in a good place, they're in a dark place again, they're in a good place again, maybe there's in some kind of middle ground next, and then bam, great ending. That's not a movie, that's just a bunch of ideas that you've just assorted all together. So please God, don't Halloween Ends our character arcs here and give us a good murder mystery, and this will be a badass Scream 7. How do you guys feel about potentially 4 writers from Scream 7? Is this something that worries you, or do you not really care? Are you just excited for Scream 7, whatever the f it's gonna be? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this brand new Scream 7 update. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content in the future. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you want to see this channel grow. Please check out today's sponsor, Don't Get Stabbed, by clicking on the link in the description of this video, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.